Throw away for obvious reasons. I've been staring at this screen for over an hour, trying to find the right words. Deleting. Rewriting. But there's no easy way to say it. So I'll just start. I'm 31 now. I have a great job, a family, a life I built from nothing. But this isn't a success story. It's a story about betrayal. About how the people who are supposed to protect you can throw you away like garbage. And how, even after everything, they'll still come back when they think you have something they can take. This all started when I was 15. My mom died when I was 4. Cancer. I don't remember much, just flashes. Her laugh, the way she smelled like vanilla and something floral, the way she'd run her fingers through my hair when I couldn't sleep. I used to dream about her when I was little, and in my dreams, she was always waiting for me, arms open, like I could just run to her, and everything would be okay. Then I'd wake up, and she'd still be gone. Dad did his best, at first. He wasn't perfect, but I remember how he used to carry me on his shoulders when I got too tired to walk. How he'd read the same bedtime story over and over because I refused to sleep until I heard how the knight saved the princess one more time. But that was before Kim. He remarried when I was 7. Kim was 35, blonde, and had the kind of smile that looked warm if you didn't know any better. She tried at first, really tried. Baking cookies, helping with my homework, calling me sweetie in this soft, practiced voice. I remember wanting to believe she cared. Then Molly was born, and everything changed. Dad had always been strict, but after Molly, it was like I didn't exist unless I was doing something wrong. I still remember bringing home a B+ on a brutal chemistry test. I was so damn proud of myself. He barely glanced at the paper. Why isn't this an A? One time, I made the basketball team. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd be happy. Why aren't you a starter? But Molly? She could do no wrong. She once threw a full-on tantrum in the middle of a grocery store, knocked over an entire shelf of cereal boxes, and Kim just laughed. She's just got a strong personality, she said, smoothing Molly's hair like she was some tiny, misunderstood genius. Meanwhile, if I so much as rolled my eyes, I was being disrespectful. Looking back, I think I had undiagnosed ADHD. I couldn't sit still, couldn't focus, forgot things constantly. But instead of getting me help, Dad just yelled, "Why can't you be normal like your sister?" Kim played her part well, always made sure Dad saw me as the problem. She'd accidentally shrink my clothes in the wash, move my stuff, and then tell Dad I was messy. Cook just enough dinner for 3, so I had to make myself a sandwich and look ungrateful when she sighed about how I never appreciated her. It was always little things, things I couldn't prove. Then, when I was 15, I saw something that changed everything. I was walking home from school, taking my usual shortcut through Wilson Park. It was chilly that day, one of those crisp fall afternoons where the air is sharp, but the sun is still warm. Leaves crunched under my sneakers. I was thinking about homework, about what I'd have to scrounge up for dinner, just normal stuff. Then I saw her, Kim. She was standing by the old gazebo with some guy. At first, I thought maybe they were just talking. A friend. A coworker. Then she kissed him. And not just a peck. I stopped cold. My stomach flipped. I recognized the guy. His name was Max. He'd been to our house before. Supposedly for some charity event Kim was organizing. Always dressed sharp, all muscles and slicked back hair. I felt like I was going to be sick. I wanted to run up and scream at her. Tell her I knew. But I didn't. Because even then, I knew she'd find a way to turn it around on me. So I kept walking. Pretended I hadn't seen a damn thing. I tried to forget, but after that, I started noticing everything. Like how Molly's hair was this reddish-brown color that nobody else in our family had. One night, I got up for water and overheard Kim whispering on the phone. I wasn't even trying to eavesdrop. I just froze the second I heard her tone. "You don't understand, Max. He's starting to notice." My skin went cold. He thinks she's his, but we both know the truth. I must have made a noise because she went silent. Then, in that sickly sweet voice, she called out, "Honey, you shouldn't be up this late." I bolted back to my room, heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. That was the moment I knew. Molly wasn't Dad's kid. She was Max's. And Kim must have realized I knew something, because suddenly, she was watching me like a hawk. always appearing out of nowhere if I was near Molly, whispering to Dad when she thought I couldn't hear. One night, I was just helping Molly with her math homework. Kim walked in, yanked her away so hard Molly actually whimpered. Then she told Dad I was acting weird around her. I didn't understand what she was doing. Not until the night everything fell apart. It was 2 weeks after I saw her with Max. I came home from school, and something felt off. There were 2 police cars parked outside. I stepped inside, and the first thing I heard was Kim sobbing. Loud, dramatic, fake. Dad stood in the corner, fists clenched. 2 cops sat across from Kim on the couch, nodding sympathetically. Molly was nowhere to be seen. Everyone stopped talking when they saw me. One of the cops stood up. "Logan, can we have a word?" My throat went dry. "What's going on?" They led me into the kitchen, away from Kim and Dad. I could still hear her crying. The cop cleared his throat. "Your stepmother and sister have told us some very concerning things." I stared at him. "They said you've been inappropriate with Molly." I couldn't even process the words at first. My brain just shut down. "What?" "We need to ask you some questions." The room felt like it was tilting. My chest got tight. "No, that never happened." I must have repeated it a dozen times. They just kept asking the same sick questions. "Where did you touch her? How many times? Did you threaten her?" I thought I was going to throw up. I could still hear Kim sobbing in the other room, playing the victim. And Dad? He didn't say a word. Just stood there, glaring at me. Finally, one of the cops asked if I wanted to make a statement. I told them Kim was lying, that she was trying to get rid of me because I caught her cheating. Big mistake. Dad snapped. He lunged at me. "You sick little bastard," he shouted. I should have known. One of the cops pulled him back. "Sir, calm down. Get out." Dad's voice was ice. I stared at him, shaking my head. "Dad, she's lying." He grabbed a trash bag, threw it at me. "You have 10 minutes to pack your shit and leave." Kim stood behind him, clutching Molly, her expression pure victory. I wanted to scream, to tell Molly the truth. But what was the point? He watched me pack, made sure I left. And as I stepped out into the cold, the last thing I heard was him whispering to Molly, "You're safe now." I walked for hours that night. Didn't know where I was going. Didn't know what I was supposed to do. The air was cold, sharp, like tiny needles against my skin, but I barely felt it. My mind kept replaying what had just happened. Dad throwing that trash bag at me. Kim standing behind him, playing the grieving mother. Molly's confused little face, peeking out from behind her mother's shoulder. "You're safe now," Dad had said. Like I was the danger. Like I was the one who needed to be kept away. I checked my pockets. $42 and some change. No phone, no ID, no plan. Just a trash bag full of clothes and a backpack with my school books that I'd never open again. I wasn't even a person anymore. Just a stain they scrubbed out of their lives. I went to Kyle's house first. He was my best friend. Or at least, I thought he was. I knocked on his window, careful not to wake his parents. He pulled back the curtain, saw me standing there, and his face changed. "Dude, you can't be here," he whispered. "Kyle, come on. Just for tonight." "My mom said I'm not allowed to talk to you." His voice was hushed, but firm. "Kyle, you know me." My chest ached. "You know I didn't." "Man, I don't know anything." His eyes darted over his shoulder, like he was afraid someone would catch him even talking to me. Then he shut the curtain. I stood there, staring at my reflection in the glass, breath fogging up the window. I wasn't even angry, just empty. I tried another friend, then another. Same reaction. Kim had gotten to them first. Of course she had. By midnight, I ended up at an old warehouse near the train tracks. I wasn't alone. A few guys were huddled around a metal barrel, flames flickering inside. One of them, Tom, noticed me standing there, looking lost. "You knew?" he asked. I hesitated. I wasn't like them. I wasn't homeless. I had a home. I had a family. Didn't I? "Yeah," I said. Tom sized me up, then jerked his head toward the fire. "All right, kid. You can sit, but don't be an asshole." I sat. Nobody asked me anything. They just let me be. The next few months were the hardest of my life. I couldn't go back to school. Couldn't get a real job. Nobody would hire a 15-year-old with no address. I stole. I hated it, but I did. Just small stuff. A sandwich here, a few bucks from an open tip jar there. Enough to eat. Enough to get by. I learned how to go unnoticed. How to sit in the back of a diner long enough to warm up, but not long enough to get kicked out. How to sleep in a train station without getting my stuff stolen. One time, I overheard a woman at a grocery store whisper to someone, "That Logan kid? Yeah, I heard he ran away after what he did. Probably off doing drugs somewhere." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them, "No, that's not what happened. I didn't do anything." She lied. She lied. But what was the point? People believe what they want to believe. Tom was the only one who didn't treat me like I was garbage. He was in his 50s, had been on the streets for years. Lost his wife to cancer, lost his house when the medical bills piled up. He looked out for me in the way I wished my dad had. One night, we were sitting on the curb outside a gas station, sharing a can of beans he'd somehow gotten his hands on. "You need to leave this town," he said. "And go where?" "Anywhere." He poked at the can with a plastic fork. "This place ain't ever gonna see you as anything but a monster. Doesn't matter if it's true or not. People like a good story. You gotta start over somewhere new." I knew he was right, but I was scared. I was just a kid. Where was I supposed to go? Then, one night, it didn't matter anymore. The cops showed up at the warehouse. Somebody had called in a trespassing report. 10 minutes. One of the officers barked. "Then we're arresting whoever's still here." I lost what little I had that night. My trash bag of clothes. My school books. My Game Boy. Everything. Tom and I walked all night, ended up in the next town over. At sunrise, we found ourselves at a truck stop diner. I was counting my money, $27 and some change, when Tom sighed and pulled out his wallet. He had 40 bucks. "Got a cousin in the city," he said. "Owes me a favor. He manages a restaurant. Maybe he can help you out." He scribbled down an address, then shoved the last of his money into my hands. "Take a bus. Get out of here while you still can." "Tom, what about you?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm too old to start over, kid. But you? You still got a shot." I never saw him again. Sometimes, I wonder what happened to him. I took a Greyhound to the city that night. Slept at the bus station for a week before I finally worked up the courage to find Tom's cousin, Dave. Dave didn't ask a lot of questions. Just looked me up and down, then said, "You willing to work?" "Yeah." "All right. You wash dishes. You screw up, you're out." "Got it." "Got it." For the first time in months, I had something steady. It wasn't much. Just scrubbing plates in the back of a restaurant. But it was a start. And I wasn't about to waste it. I worked harder than I ever had in my life. Dishwashing wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. And steady was what I needed. Dave wasn't a warm guy, not the kind to offer fatherly advice or ask how your day was, but he was fair. If you worked hard and didn't screw around, he left you alone. That was fine by me. I wasn't looking for anyone to take me in. I just needed a shot. The first few months were brutal. I was sleeping in the restaurant storage room, sneaking in after hours, laying down on a pile of old flour sacks, and setting an alarm so I could leave before the morning shift arrived. Some nights, I barely got any sleep, terrified someone would find me and I'd lose everything. But it was better than the street, better than freezing on a bench or hiding out in an abandoned warehouse. And for the first time in forever, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something. 6 months in, I was scrubbing a pan when Dave tossed an apron at me. "You're moving to prep?" I blinked. "What?" "You heard me," he said. "You're not an idiot, and you don't whine. That's more than I can say for most of the kids working here. So congrats, kid. You're moving up." I hadn't realized how badly I'd needed to hear that. It was the first time in years someone had looked at me and seen potential instead of a screw-up, instead of a problem. That was the night I started to believe maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as worthless as my dad had made me feel. Eventually, I saved enough to rent a tiny room in a pretty sketchy part of town. It was barely bigger than a closet. The walls were so thin I could hear my neighbor coughing at night, and the place always smelled like mildew no matter how much I cleaned. But it was mine. I worked my way up from prep cook to line cook. Then, one day, Dave pulled me aside and asked if I wanted to try waiting tables. "You're good at keeping your head down," he said, "but you're also good at reading people. Customers like that. You want to give it a shot? More tips? More hours? A chance to actually interact with people instead of hiding in the back?" I said yes. That's when I met Megan. She was a regular, came in twice a week with her mom. I remember the first time she sat in my section. "What's good here?" she asked. Not, "What's the special?" or "What do you recommend?" Like I was a human being, not just a uniform. I told her about the carbonara. She smiled. "You actually know who makes the food?" she said. "Most servers just read off a script." We talked for 10 minutes that night, then 10 more the next time she came in, and the next. She was studying business, and she'd sometimes bring her homework. One night, she was groaning over a textbook, rubbing her temples like the numbers were physically hurting her. "How can a company lose money but still show a profit?" she muttered. I refilled her water. "Creative accounting," I said. "They're probably moving numbers around to make it look good for investors." She stared at me. "How do you know about corporate accounting?" I hesitated, then admitted I'd been reading business books at the library. I don't know why I said it. Maybe because she actually listened to me. Instead of laughing, she grinned. "That's amazing. Most people our age don't care about this stuff. Hey, want to help me with this problem?" That was the start of everything. I told her I never finished high school. She didn't pity me, didn't look at me like I was broken. She just said, "Then let's get you your GED." And she helped me do it. 5 years passed like that. Wake up, work, study, sleep, repeat. I didn't date, didn't party, didn't have a social life outside of Megan. I was too busy proving to myself that I could be someone. Then one night, Megan walked into the restaurant, eyes practically glowing. "Guess what?" she said. "What?" "My dad's looking for someone to help manage his new property development project. Entry-level, but lots of room to grow. You should apply." I froze. "Megan, I never even finished high school. You got your GED, right?" She crossed her arms. "That's all that matters. Just try. What's the worst that could happen?" The worst that could happen? She could find out about my past. About Kim's lies. About everything. But she kept pushing. Please? For me. So I applied. I had to borrow a suit from Dave. Still fit weird. But I went to the interview. Megan's dad, Mark, was intimidating as hell. He just stared at me for a full minute before speaking. "Megan says you understand business. Prove it." I don't even remember what I said. Something about market trends, housing demand, how commercial real estate was shifting. At the end, he nodded. "You start Monday." I told Megan I got the job. She hugged me, and I almost cried. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. That job changed my life. Mark became the father I wished I'd had. He listened when I had ideas, taught me everything about real estate development. Within a year, I was managing my own projects. The whole time, Megan and I got closer. We'd get coffee after work, talk for hours, but I never asked her out. I kept thinking about my past, about Kim's lies, about how Megan deserved someone better. Then, one night, we were working late, just the two of us. She set down her pen, looked me right in the eyes, and said, "For someone so smart about business, you're really dumb about some things." "Like what?" She smiled. "Like the fact that I've been waiting 2 years for you to ask me out." I just stared at her. Finally, I managed to say, "I'm not good enough for you, Megan. Try me." So I told her everything. About Kim. About the accusations. About living on the streets. I kept waiting for her to look at me differently. For her to flinch. Instead, she started crying. Then she got mad. "Those horrible people," she whispered. "How could they do that to their own son?" Then she kissed me. And just like that, I stopped running from my past. I married Megan 2 years later. Her family actually treated me like a son. We had our first kid, a boy. Bought a 5-bedroom house in a good neighborhood. Life was perfect. Until 3 months ago. I was scrolling through Facebook at work when I saw it. A friend request. From my father. I just sat there, staring at my phone like an idiot. Megan noticed as soon as she got home. "Babe, what's wrong?" she asked, setting our son down for his nap. I turned my phone toward her. Dad found me. I didn't open the message right away. Just stared at the friend request, my thumb hovering over the screen. 16 years. 16 years of nothing. No calls. No letters. No hey, son. Maybe I overreacted and shouldn't have thrown you out in the middle of the night like a piece of trash. And now, here he was. Megan sat down next to me, watching my face carefully. What are you going to do? She asked. I exhaled. I don't know. Want me to read it first? I handed her my phone. She opened the message and read it out loud. Son, I know it's been a long time. I'm getting older now and been thinking a lot about the past. Not a day goes by that I don't think about you. Kim and I want to make things right. Molly misses her big brother. Please give us a chance to explain. Love, Dad. I let out a short laugh, but it wasn't a happy one. Molly misses me? I scoffed. She was 8 when they threw me out. She probably doesn't even remember me. Megan squeezed my hand. You don't have to respond. I should have listened to her, but I didn't. Maybe I was an idiot. Maybe some part of me still wanted answers. Maybe, deep down, I still wanted to hear him say he was sorry. So I accepted the request and messaged back. Why now? His response came fast. I'm 58 now. Had some health scares. Made me realize life's too short for grudges. Molly's getting married soon. Would mean a lot to have you there. I stared at the words, my stomach twisting. Health scares? Grudges? Like I'd just been sulking all these years for no reason? Like it wasn't him who threw his only son onto the street because of a lie? I messaged back anyway. Where is Kim now? Still with me, he wrote. She wants to see you too. We all do. Megan was right. I shouldn't have responded. But against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them. They showed up at my house that Saturday morning. Dad looked old. Older than I expected. Gray hair. Walked with a slight limp. But Kim? She hadn't changed at all. Same fake smile, same calculating eyes. Molly had grown up too. She looked even more like Max now, but nobody seemed to notice. The first few minutes were awkward. No one knew what to say. Then Molly spotted our family photos on the wall. Is this your son? She asked, pointing at a picture of Jake. Yeah, I said. She whispered, I'm an aunt. Then, to my surprise, she started crying. Kim immediately swooped in to comfort her. Same old Kim. Always the actress. Dad stepped into my house like he belonged there. Eyes scanning everything, that same barely hidden approval he never used to give me. You've done well for yourself, he said, nodding. Real estate development, huh? Never would have guessed. I folded my arms. Megan's dad gave me a chance, I said. Unlike some people. Kim jumped in before the silence got too heavy. We all made mistakes back then, she said, voice syrupy sweet. We're here to make things right. Megan, who had been standing near the door, took that as her cue to leave before she said something she'd regret. I'll check on Jake, she muttered and disappeared. Molly wandered through the living room, fingers skimming the furniture, the walls, like she was trying to claim it. This house is amazing, she said. 5 bedrooms, but you only have 1 kid? I forced a polite smile. Planning for more, I said. And we use one as an office. Not that it's any of your business. Dad clapped a hand on my shoulder, steering me toward my office with that whole let's talk man-to-man routine. That should have been my first warning. He sank into my chair like he owned it. Son, he started, I need to ask you something important. I stayed standing. What? He sighed like this was some big emotional burden for him. Molly's getting married. Starting a family. But houses are expensive these days, and well, you've got all this space. My stomach turned. No way. Now, hear me out, he said, holding up his hands. You make good money now. You could easily buy another house. But Molly and Steve, they're just starting out. This place would be perfect for them. I just stared at him. Are you seriously asking me to give my house to Molly? He cleared his throat. Well, not give exactly. Maybe sell it to them cheap. Get out. He sighed, rubbing his temples like I was the unreasonable one. Son, be reasonable. It's your sister. The sister you chose over me? My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. The one you kicked me out for? That sister? He had the audacity to look annoyed. like I was dragging up something inconvenient. That was a misunderstanding. I laughed. A misunderstanding? I shook my head. You threw me out at 15. I lived on the streets. Before he could come up with another excuse, Kim came rushing in, fake concern plastered on her face. Everything okay in here? I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Oh yeah, Kim. Everything's fantastic. I turned back to Dad. He was just asking me to give my house to your daughter. I smiled, sharp enough to cut. You know, the one who isn't even his. The room went dead silent. Kim's face drained of color. Dad froze. Molly looked confused, like she was trying to figure out if she'd heard me right. And just like that, the whole game changed. Kim was the first to react. Logan, she said, her voice trembling, but her eyes sharp. That's a horrible thing to say. You're just trying to hurt us, like you always do. Classic Kim. Always the victim. Always twisting the truth until she was the one being wronged. Molly still looked lost, her gaze darting between us like she was trying to piece together a puzzle with missing pieces. Dad? He just stood there, silent, staring at me like he was seeing me for the first time. What are you talking about? Molly finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I exhaled sharply. Ask her, I said, jerking my chin toward Kim. Molly turned, hesitant. Mom. Kim shook her head quickly. Don't listen to him. He's always been jealous. Jealous? I barked out a laugh. Of what, exactly? Being thrown out at 15? Living on the streets? Losing everything because you decided I was in the way? Kim flinched. Molly took a step back. Is it true? She asked, her voice unsteady. Am I not his? Kim didn't answer. She didn't need to. Molly's breath hitched. Her hands were shaking. Oh my God. Dad swallowed hard, then turned to me. How long have you known? Since I was 15, I said flatly. I didn't say anything because I knew you wouldn't believe me. Just like you didn't believe me when she framed me. The weight of my words settled over the room like a thick fog. Dad opened his mouth, then closed it. Then he did something I never expected. He sat down, buried his face in his hands, and started to cry. Not quiet, dignified tears. Full body, shaking sobs. I didn't feel triumphant. Didn't feel anything, really. Just tired. Molly looked frozen in place. Kim? She did what she always did. She ran, grabbed her purse, bolted for the door, mumbling something about needing to fix this. She never came back. The next few weeks were chaos. Dad demanded a DNA test. The results confirmed it. 0% chance he was Molly's father. That night, he came to my office. Didn't even wait to get home. Just walked in, sat down, and broke apart right there at my desk. Everything I thought I knew, he whispered. For the last 24 years, it was all a lie. I should have felt satisfied. Maybe even happy. This was proof I'd been telling the truth all along. But watching my father, this man who had terrified me as a kid, sitting there, completely broken, it just felt empty. He asked if I knew where Max was. I told him the truth. That Max had been in and out of homeless shelters for years. That the last time I heard anything about him, he was strung out on something behind a convenience store. 2 weeks later, Molly found out Max was dead. Overdosed 2 years ago. That broke her. She started sending me these long, rambling texts at 3 in the morning. I don't know who I am anymore. I look in the mirror, and all I see is him. I feel like my whole life was a joke. I felt bad for her. But Megan was right. I needed to keep my distance. Every time I responded, she clung tighter. Then her ex-fiancé reached out to me. Said he wanted to know if the crazy ran in the family. Like Molly being lied to her entire life was somehow her fault. I told him to go to hell. Meanwhile, Dad unraveled. One night, he went home, confronted Kim. She tried to spin it, tried to convince him the DNA test was wrong. He didn't buy it. For the first time in decades, her manipulation didn't work. And he snapped. He didn't just yell. He hurt her. 3 fractured vertebrae. She ended up in the hospital. Molly was the one who called the cops. Dad got arrested right there in their living room. 3 to 5 years. Could have been worse, but the judge took his age and clean record into account. Kim? She spiraled. Turned out she'd been hooked on pain pills for years, long before Dad put her in the hospital. She'd just hidden it well. She checked into rehab. Molly moved in with an aunt. She refuses to speak to Kim. She barely speaks to Dad. And me? I cut ties. Didn't go to Dad's trial. Didn't visit him in jail. I had my own family to worry about. Megan was pregnant again. A girl this time. Those extra bedrooms in our house were finally going to good use. Just not in the way Dad and Kim had expected. Funny how life works out sometimes. Molly messaged me one last time yesterday. Said she was moving out of state. Starting fresh. She asked if we could stay in touch. I told her maybe someday. But not now. Not yet. I need to focus on my own family for a while. That's it, I guess. Story's over. No more drama. No updates needed. Sometimes, the best revenge is just being happy.